Welcome to NovoEDTalks, where we reveal real-world strategies and expert insights from learning and development professionals. In every episode, we chat with practitioners, course designers, learning strategists, and business leads. We hear about their experiences in the learning industry and predictions for the profession and the trends that they're seeing. But before we get started, a little bit about NovoEd. Founded at Stanford's Social Algorithms Lab in 2012, NovoEd is a people-centric, capability-building platform that combines social and collaborative learning to drive performance readiness at scale. Through cohort-based experiences centered around human interaction, NovoEd taps into collective wisdom, placing each learner at the center of perspective, application, and expertise. Large enterprises such as 3M, GE, Marriott International, and Nestle partner with NovoEd to accelerate their critical initiatives, reconnect teams, and achieve rapid alignment through learning that is felt, experienced, and swiftly transformed into impact. Now, let's meet our guest for today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NovoEDTalks podcast, a space for training trailblazers to get real. My name is Melissa Fisk. I'm the producer of the NovoEDTalks podcast, and today I am joined by Tim Foley, who is the head of AI adoption at International Motors. Tim works at International Motors, where he bridges organizational culture and cutting-edge innovation. With a background in organizational development, he's passionate about making AI adoption a human-centered, engaging journey that empowers teams to work smarter and unlock creativity. Tim believes in, quote, learning by using, quote, and leads with a philosophy that blends technology with heart to create workplaces where people thrive. Tim, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by just kind of introducing yourself, your role, and how AI is beginning to shape kind of what your team is doing over there at International Motors.
Okay. So International Motors, we make buses and trucks and engines, international brand, both electric vehicles and combustion vehicles. I've been with them well over 35 years. In OD, HR, talent, learning, change, culture kind of roles. My team did all of that until I got into the AI role full time. Maybe I should start with my experience with it was a little over 2 years ago now when ChatGPT 3.5 came out. I was just fascinated with it and started using it for everything. But then, had that oh my God moment that everyone has, this is incredibly powerful and it's going to change absolutely everything. And you kind of have a couple sleepless nights first until, you realize that the genie's out of the bottle, so you might as well learn it. But then I realized that it was an incredible opportunity for our company, and to leverage AI. And if we could get out ahead of that, ahead of others, it could be a big advantage. And so I saw how transformational it was. And I saw my role with, learning and people-centered, change management, that it was an incredible opportunity. And so I started showing my boss, the CHRO, all the cool things, and so I got nominated for this AI task force. This was over 2 years ago as the HR rep, And so at first everyone's deer in the headlights. Oh my God, scared, a representative from every part of the business. But we were able to align on, let's just experiment. Let's not try to do, all at once. Let's just get a red team and have legal people, IT people, but people from all across the business. And let's test this out. We got 300 licenses for 365 Copilot, but we only started with a group of about 25, and we called it a red team. And we learned, how to use it. And then we actually tried to break it, or tried to find, because everyone was worried about there's loose sharing of information and AI is going to find it all. But that wasn't the case. We tested it in every domain and, didn't have any issues. So we built trust through that process. Instead of, trying to do it all at once in a mass rollout, if people didn't understand it, they were too nervous. Let's start small, walk before we run kind of approach. And so once that was successful, then I started onboarding the rest of, we got 25 people from each function finance, procurement, IT, HR, et cetera, and pick the early adopters. That's an important part of this. We didn't pick people who didn't want to. I knew in my career that's not going to work. So we found, like, we cherry picked the early adopters in each area, and then we ran them as cohorts, intact teams within those functions, and that enabled us to tailor the use cases to that group, right? And so, when we learned some things really fast, that in spite of the fact we put some really good LXP programs for AI, people are too busy and they won't do that kind of learning. So we learned that you had to be in person. You had to get people to share their use cases and their successes. You had to show lots of demos, because when people see it, then that ignites the curiosity. And then the challenge is you got to get about 10 hours of practice, like deliberate practice, before you really hits you like, oh my God, I understand this thing. It's amazing. And I can use it for anything. I just have a conversation like with another human. It takes about 10 hours before people realize that. And so you have to be creative in finding ways to get people that practice. And so we realized that we have a 12-week onboarding process, and we meet every week with each of these teams, and we do live demos tailored to their area of the business. And then we also came up with snackable micro learnings, and we use AI to develop these. We have agents for each persona, across our business, and it creates these 5-minute posts, like in Microsoft Teams, that 3 to 5 times a week we post them, and it's a use case that's interesting to them. And all they got to do is click a link, and the prompt is preloaded in Copilot, and it goes right in Copilot. They hit enter, or they might add a little bit more information, and boom, they could see the amazing things that it can do. And those go out like 3 to 5 times per week, and then we nudge those. And those two things, live sessions, we have open hour sessions, any chance we could get with all hands meetings in the different functions. Any focus group that the company has, we get invited. Any chance we can get live, showing people what it can do, and then nudging. That's kind of how we got started. And that first 300 license, it went really well. We had 98% active usage, which is really good, and 25 hours, or an hour a day of savings from Copilot. With that first pilot.
That's incredible. And wow, what a, blueprint that folks could follow for how you all did that. Like, I love that you took individuals from each department to see how it would be applicable to that department and how they could use it as a tool for that department.
And the interesting thing was, it was kind of a unique set of circumstances, because they formed that AI task force, and then our CIO retired. And that stayed open. And so that team was the AI, authority. And then, I was leading it from the OD, from the change management, for the learning and development perspective. And so how we rolled it out was more of a behavior change. It wasn't a tech rollout. We knew it was a change management, getting people to develop habits, create psychological safety, get, social learning going. And so we were able to have that kind of an adoption approach, where a lot of companies, I think it's from the IT, and they don't have that come from.
Yes, I actually want to ask you about that. What kind of made you approach it that way, like versus a tech rollout, but more of like a change?
My whole career, is so like always involved with change, whether that was lean transformations or agile work. Just learned that the mass rollouts never worked. But when you started with people who wanted to, got success, showed the success, there's always another group that wants to join. There's a video that I always show. It's how to start a movement, and it's this shirtless guy at this park where some kind of an event, and then another couple people start going up and dancing with him, supporting him. And then before you know it, there's 10 people, and then there's 50, and then everybody's running to be in there.
Wow.
It's a pretty cool video that shows how organic change actually works. And so we started bottom up, and we were able to make decisions and do things that way and get a lot of momentum. And then when the new CIO joined, he's established a top-down governance where we have an AI acceleration team, which I'm part of, but we prioritize where we're going to focus AI in the business and make sure we get the ROI. We do like co-innovation projects, like 3 or 4 at a time in sprints. And we established the governance top down. So that's all meeting together. But for the first couple of years, it was bottom up. And I'm glad it went that way. But it was a unique set of circumstances that allowed us to do that.
Having this like blank slate problem, right? Where it's like, okay, there's endless things that can do with it. Like, how did you integrate this into like daily, like talk more about some of the kind of like programs and things you did, like with the prompts, about how you got people to like see like the act, like, you know, get the behavior change to stick, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Right, because the blank slate problem is everyone, you know, hears about AI, and then some nerd like me is talking about it, and then you'll say, oh, you can just ask it anything, just go ask it anything, and then they look and it's this blank screen, and they have no idea what to ask it. So there's all this friction to try to use it and to try to use it effectively. They don't know how to prompt yet. They don't even know what a prompt is, you know. But that's what so you have to find ways to get them that 10 hours of, and so it's just showing them a lot of demos. And because they're grouped together in like areas, you can use AI to come up with really cool use cases. You know, we use AI to develop all of our demos and all of our, you know, snackable learning posts. And so you find ways to put a use case out there that is likely to resonate. And then no low friction, just let them click, let them hit a button, and let them see what it does. Oh my God. And then you can suggest some follow-up activities to get them to realize it's not like Googling one and done. It's a conversation, and you build with it. You know, it augments, and you work with it like a co-pilot. Yeah. And so it was just a matter of innovating. So every one of those cohorts, at the end of the 12 weeks, we would have retrospectives. And we even used AI to create podcasts. Like I would take all the survey data, all of the transcripts from every meeting, and put it all in Notebook LM and make this podcast, and then play it. And people were just amazed at how good the podcast was. But that like broke the ice, and they were open and comfortable to share. Yeah, we could try this and we could try that. So we innovated through the whole process to just keep figuring out ways to meet people where they're at in the flow of work, and just try to get them to practice 10, 15 minutes a day. That's it. And if they do that in a few weeks, they're going to have that moment where they get the aha.
Now, when you say that's the more or less the strategy approach to getting like mass adoption, kind of like what you're talking about with the video analogy there, where it's like, how do you get to that mass adoption? Is it just those 10 to 15 minutes, like every few days? And talk a little more about the strategy behind that.
Yeah, so we started with those premium licenses, and then we figured that out, you know, iterating through the different teams, because we did one team, and then we did 4 more, and then we did 4 more, and then we did 4 more, you know, and that allowed us to keep improving that process. And then we realized, well, what about everyone else? There's only 300 people that have this. Yeah. And so then we refocused to reach all our knowledge workers, and we picked the enthusiasts in that first 300. And we found people like 3 or 4 in finance, 3 or 4 in procurement, 3 or 4 in operations, 3 or 4 in marketing and sales. And we asked them to be champions. And they helped us launch an AI forum. It was a community in Microsoft Viva Engage. It's like an internal social platform. And we launched that. But then we had an incentive where if they were active, they got points for getting us a meeting with a sponsor in that function, or getting us a chance to speak at an all hands meeting, or get a team who's interested in, you know, and we gave them points, and the people with most points got to get extra special training from like Microsoft or OpenAI. Plus they could take a license and give it to somebody that they thought would need it, you know, and it really motivated them. And so we stood up, and so we would put posts in this new community, and then the champions would get points for responding and posting on their own, you know, and it really worked really well. So now that is got over 500 people that community reaches. There's almost 2,000 members. And now everybody can use Copilot for web. That's the free version. But now that is extremely powerful. Microsoft's really come a long way. And so now it has GPT-5. It has personalization and memory. You can build agents without a premium license. And so you can do a lot with that. And so, that's been a huge shift, is we also focus on everybody, but then also we onboard with the premium tools. And when people are ready, though, we have a waiting list. We have metrics with Copilot dashboard. We can tell who's ready, for that. And
I was just going to ask you about that, Tim. When you mentioned metrics and you've mentioned some numbers about how many folks are using the tools now, how do you have a formal way that you're kind of measuring the usage of this, or the quality in the way that people are using it? And is there even any way to tie it to the bottom line or the overall ROI of the business?
Yeah, that's a challenge. We start with like the active usage, of course. And so we have 75, more than 3/4 of our knowledge workers are actively using AI, multiple times a week.
Wow.
Almost daily. That's and just look at benchmarks. That's pretty good. We got almost about 1 out of 5 people using it daily as power users. And so then we want to marry that two together. Like the first transformation is to get everyone using it daily, and now there's the new transformation to agentic, which is another transformation in of itself. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. So we measured that the active usage, then the time savings, but the time savings don't really resonate with the executives because you can't tangibly tie it to the bottom line. It's just people are saving time. What are they doing with it? Now we have an extra metric. Right. When we establish the time savings, we ask people what % of the time would they estimate that they reallocate to higher value added work. And we're, about half the people say about half of the time they save is reallocated to more valuable work. That helps a little bit. But then we shifted to realizing that we need to have some lighthouse projects that we can clearly demonstrate the ROI. So with that AI accelerator team, we have a process of finding opportunities, prioritizing them, and then activating like 4 every few months in a sprint with co-innovation. So like one of those projects was duplicate invoicing. There was duplicate payments. There was a lot of money being saved when we start using AI to fix that problem. How do optimizing scheduling it's very complicated. We're using AI for that. And there's clear, also like in our Tulsa bus plant, using vision AI on the line, experimenting with that. When you have projects like that, that's easy to come up with big numbers of ROI that really resonate with the executives. So we that's been how we've demonstrated that. It's still hard to tie the time savings with that. But I think you got to have those two things go together. Like, it's like behavior before build. Like we were fortunate to have this bottom up effort to get adoption across our whole workforce. So now when we do these strategic AI things, we have a workforce that understands AI and knows to use it and won't just ignore it. A lot of companies hire people to come in and build these great AI applications, but the workforce doesn't trust it. They don't know how to use it, and nobody uses it. So that's why I think that behavior before build is an important principle.
Absolutely. And there's something that you said at the beginning that you just mentioned again is that I think is so important. The building the trust thing, like getting the whole team to kind of have trust in AI tools and be able to trust using them. Because I do think there's something that's super powerful that's happening right now where it's like the individual worker, right? The person who's doing their day-to-day job, once they trust AI and know like how to best use it, they can say, hey,
yes,
they can help come up with ideas, right? For how to kind of streamline processes within the organization using AI, which is sometimes things that the people who aren't in the day-to-day, in the thick of it, aren't going to or understand. So
Yeah.
I love that. I love that you've made that kind of like at the core of this whole initiative is the building the trust part of it.
Yeah,
Uh,
because you can't argue people out of fear
right,
or mistrust. And so like
right.
right off the bat, we proved it with the red teams, and earned the trust that way with IT and legal. And then they trusted us. Um, and then like what you said, like important thing we used is like the diffusion of innovation model. It's that bell curve, and it's like the early adopters are a small percent. We focused on them and them only at first and got the momentum there. But then an
Yeah.
interesting thing happens is you find all the nerds in that first 20%.
Yeah.
Then you got to cross the chasm, it's called, because the next group doesn't listen to nerds like me. They listen to people they trust in their organization. So that's why the champions approach is so important, because they'll listen to people they know and trust. And if they talk about AI and show them a use case, they'll think they can do it versus, someone like me. So we had to shift our change management to working with champions and social learning and social proof after we found all the initial early adopters, and that lends itself to a trust building approach. The
I
other
was
thing
just
is,
I was just going to ask you about
yeah,
that. Like, and, you mentioned that, getting over the fear and skepticism, or, like, how do you cross that chasm? And, this champions program sounds like how you did that. Could you talk a little bit more about what that looked like structurally, like how you set that up?
one of the important things that we did was, the AI policy was very scary and complicated. And if people think
Yeah.
they might get in trouble for using AI and they don't
Yes.
understand it, they're not going to do it. And so we were able, because we have Microsoft primarily. We also have other tools. Don't get me wrong, but Microsoft has built everything up with the security in mind. And so everything you do with Copilot never leaves our tenant. It's safe, and you can use company data. So it's just really simple. Hey, we want you to use AI tools. That's awesome. But if you're using company data, use Copilot because it's safe. That's it. And then people can understand it. And oftentimes it's much more complicated for people. And so it's not like we kind of stumbled into that, but
Yeah.
in hindsight, that's really important to make it clear that it's Copilot safe. You can do anything with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important. You mentioned a couple of these really impactful, I think you called them lighthouse projects, as you talked about in different areas of the business that's really starting to show, significant, benefits and impact. But, looking ahead as we shift more and more from just like the co-pilots to more of these types of projects and more autonomous workflows, like how are you thinking about government's human in the
Yeah,
loop
yeah.
design, sustaining these habits?
And we're in the throes of that now. So like we also have ChatGPT Enterprise, and so that has the agent mode, and that is amazing. Like I have an agent working on a project now while we're in this meeting, and it's just you can if you just give it an endpoint that you want and you're clear about that, it just works on its own for 15, 20, 30 minutes and does. That just is amazing. And so with Microsoft, you can build these agents, but what we realized is because that's another level of security and much more risky. And IT has all those connectors and all those data sources. They had those shut, and
Yeah.
so we realized people could only build like agents to use themselves, not to share and to scale across the organization. So Microsoft has helped us with an environment strategy. You can set up environments, and we have an environment for each function area of the business. And then with each of those, there's like a test. What is it? Test and production. There's 3 levels. Like you experiment with it, and then you start testing it, improving it, and then you put it in production. And these agents have to go through these gates and approvals. And if you put it in test and you need to change it, it has to go back here. And you can set up who can use that in that environment, and put the security controls in those stages. And then it has all the metrics with the agents, and you can have, the governance process with all that data and with that structure. And so we're in the middle of setting that up now.
Yeah.
And we're trying out some really cool agents, like one in HR. hooking up SAP and our other systems into an agent that if you want to ask for vacation time, you don't have to click 9 buttons and find all these sites. You just tell the agent and it's done.
Wow.
And so Microsoft has helped us, learn how to use these connectors. And then also the Power Platform, people have to learn that. So there's a lot of onboarding education. It's almost like there's 2 transformations. There's the personal productivity, getting people to daily use. And now there's the agentic, learning how to set up that infrastructure so it's safe, and then get people to learn how to build these agents and share those. So that's kind of where we're at now, is in the dual transformation path.
Wow, that's incredible. This has just been so impactful, I feel like, to hear about all of these things that you've rolled out in the grand scheme of things, a short amount of time, right? In two and a half years or so since you took on this role. Can you talk a little bit about, like, from where you started 2.5 years ago to where you are now, to a little bit about what you just talked about in the next 2.5 years? Like, what do you see as some of, like, the core themes that are going to, like, carry us through, or carry your team through kind of all of these changes?
Yeah. So walk before you run, and don't try to figure it all out. Nobody knows. So just test and experiment and do that safely, and then based on what you learn, expand it. And that sounds slow, but it's not. So that would be one, I would say. And then that 10 hours of practice. So really from a learning perspective, you have to figure out, how do you get people to get 10 hours of practice? And you just can't point them at an LXP because people are too busy. So you have to figure out ways to get, live sessions, live demos, office hours, and then, those micro learnings, where you can have those short, creative ways to get people's attention. And all they got to do is click a button and they can see, oh my God, I didn't realize it could do that. Like I was listening to a podcast with the head of Moderna. Moderna is pretty far, out there, leading the way in adoption. But their CEO talked about this guy named Fred in his career, where back when email was coming out, Fred used to print out his emails, write them, and give them to his admin to send back out, And we all know a Fred, whether that was at that time or even 10 years ago or even today. We're all Fred, and we're used to our old ways of working. Yeah. It's very hard to re-engineer it. So we came up, this was just an idea, and I used AI to come up with a campaign. It was 10 posts about don't be Fred. And I had AI image and all that. It was kind of catchy, but it was just a way to package to get them to click that link and see what it could do. So you come up with creative ideas, but you can use AI. It's just myself and one other person doing all of this, because we use AI all day long to design the surveys, to design the dashboard, programming it and having it in, I don't know how to use all that, but it programs and sets up the dashboards for me. And I just work with it step by step to do that. All that stuff, designing the posts and the measurements and all that kind of stuff. You can do so much that way.
I think the micro learnings thing, when it comes to AI, is super powerful in the way that you're talking about it, right? Where everyone has been talking about micro learnings for a while now, like they understand that, but especially with AI, I really think people need to understand going back to kind of what we were talking about with the blank slate problem. It's like, what am I supposed to ask this? I think the first time I used ChatGPT was when someone was like, oh, you can use it to plan like trips. And I was like, oh, I never thought about that. My husband and I were going to Italy and Paris, and we were like, okay, like, how do I start doing this? And I started, and it just, was my first actual case with ChatGPT. And from there, it was like, oh, okay. Exactly. And now it's, daily everywhere,
Exactly. And you can just catch that. So, however, you try a whole bunch of different ways and something sticks, and it's different for each person. But once they start seeing that, then they start being willing to try it. And maybe the next post they'll click and see, and then they can go back, because there's like the index. They could go back to old posts and find more. There's all these just short posts with these use cases. You click and you see it. So that's the blank slate problem. That's a big deal, and that's one way. Live demos in the micro learning.
Yeah.
That diffusion of innovation model, I think I would say that's another takeaway, and to keep using going forward is to start with who wants to, and then use like champions to like cross the chasm. So don't mandate it, because people won't use it until they're ready, but find the people who want to, and then use the social proof and the social learning to get that word out and have them being ambassadors for the company.
Yeah, Tim, I
Yeah.
have two more questions for you. I think one, like, just this has been a master class. I feel like how any organization could deploy AI. But I want to ask you, you have 35 years at International Motors. Tell me like how, what you've developed and what you've been doing over the last 2.5 years. How much does that pull from your prior, 30 plus years of experience?
I'd say 100%. It's just like what I learned in my career, going through lots of failed change initiatives and just learning how it works and learning that organic approach. Start with who you want, iterate, don't try to figure it all at once. That's all been applied to this. So it was like my career was perfect for this. And so like once we got rolling, I went to my boss and said, somebody's got to do this full time, and I'd love to, and my background is perfect for this. And so, she and the CEO agreed, and, that's what I've been doing. And so all that was perfect for this opportunity.
No, absolutely. I mean, everything you said today, I feel like any organization could take and be like, this is a blueprint for how we should roll this out, or start getting everyone on board with everything. So it's been incredible to hear you talk about all this. I have one final question for you, though.
Okay.
What is the most important lesson that you've learned on your journey over the past 35 years or so in this space that you would pass on to someone just starting out on theirs?
So if somebody's just starting out, like in a company and wanting to expand AI adoption, just find a team or a group of people that really want to. People, it's not that hard to find all the people that are AI enthusiasts, or to find a really passionate leader who has a team that's on board, whatever. Find a group, one team, and just bring them together, and then have them set a business goal, like something that's like a big hairy goal that you never have time to work on, and say, we want to reclaim time with AI from our normal drudgery work, and reinvest it into that goal. And then try to find that 10 hours of practice in creative ways, live demos, sharing, the micro learnings, and try to get them that practice, and they will save it. An hour. Once they hit that point, they're going to save at least an hour a day, and they're going to expand. Not only, like, I do work outside of HR and OD now. I can do finance work. I can do metrics work. I can do program. I can do anything. And so you can work out in multi functions, and then you could apply it to those important business goals, and then use that superpowers to really make a difference. And if you do that with one team, others are going to hear about it. You're going to have 3 or 4 lined up to do it again, and then you're going to have 10 more to do it. That's that organic change model. That's what I would recommend.
That's amazing. Tim, thank you so much. I feel like this interview has been one of my favorites, and I don't say that to all my guests.
Awesome. I hope it was helpful. Yeah.
I enjoy every conversation I have with all of our guests, because I think everyone has unique things to bring to the table. But this has just been something so powerful with a lot of action items that I think our listeners are going to take away and enjoy. So thank you so much for joining us today on the NovoEDTalks podcast.
Well, that was great, because one thing that, we want to reclaim our time with AI. Then you want to reinvest it in what's important work, but then we want to raise everybody else up. So we're trying to, nobody left behind. We want everybody to learn AI, and because if people start getting left behind, I'm really worried about that, not only in my company but everywhere. And you can, like, we have 75% of our workforce using AI regularly, and it's just and we still have momentum. We're going to get there. So nobody left behind. And so that's why I'm happy to hear that. Awesome. That's why I did this podcast, because I think that's important for everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Tim. We so appreciate it.
That was fun. Thank you.
And our listeners for tuning in to another episode of NovoED Talks.